It was a weapon outlawed by treaties, yet feared more than artillery. A sound that sent veterans scrambling for cover. A whisper that promised death before they ever saw it. Conceived in secrecy, unleashed in desperation, and silenced by history. To the German soldier, it wasn't just a gun. It was a nightmare that should never have existed. This is the story of the forbidden weapon that changed the rules of war, and the reason the world swore never to use it again. War has always been a contest of innovation, a race between the mind and morality. Every generation promises to fight with honor, until desperation demands something darker. And in the ruins of World War I, that darkness found a home. The year was 1915. Europe had already become a graveyard of promises. The trenches stretched from the North Sea to Switzerland, 1,000 miles of mud, rats, and corpses. Men lived underground, surrounded by barbed wire and the constant thunder of artillery. Every advance ended the same way, in blood, smoke, and silence. The generals wanted victory. The scientists were told to make it happen, by any means necessary. In the laboratories of Kaiser Wilhelm's Germany, a new kind of weapon was being born. Not a machine gun or a cannon, but something invisible, something that moved with the wind. The idea came from chemists who once studied fertilizers and industrial gases. What they built would terrify an entire generation, a weapon that killed not with bullets, but with breath. The forbidden idea was gas, chlorine, the green ghost that crawled low across the ground, burning eyes, lungs, and skin. It was not the first chemical experiment of the war, but it was the first unleashed on a massive scale. On April 22, 1915, at Ypres, German soldiers opened the valves of thousands of steel cylinders. A pale green cloud rolled toward the Allied trenches. Within minutes, the line collapsed. French and Algerian troops, choking and blinded, fled in panic. The weapon worked, but in its success lay horror. The Germans had created something that even their own soldiers feared. The wind could change direction without warning. A single gust could turn victory into catastrophe. Entire battalions trained to attack now carried gas masks wherever they went, clumsy, suffocating things that smelled of rubber and fear. The forbidden idea spread faster than any army. Within months, both sides were using chemical weapons: phosgene, mustard gas, chlorine. Scientists perfected new formulas. Soldiers paid the price. Men died coughing out their lungs, their skin blistering in the mud. The battlefield became a laboratory of suffering. When the war finally ended, the world looked back in horror. The Geneva Protocol of 1925 banned the use of chemical weapons in warfare. Nations promised never again, but promises, like treaties, have limits, especially when fear is more powerful than law. Between the wars, chemical weapons became the weapon everyone had, but no one admitted to having. Research continued in silence, buried in underground bunkers and classified files. Gas shells were stockpiled. New formulas were tested. And in Germany, scientists whispered about something even worse than chlorine, nerve agents that could kill in seconds, invisible and unstoppable. By the time the Second World War began, the forbidden weapon had evolved far beyond its first clumsy form. Yet something unexpected happened. It wasn't used. Hitler, who had himself been gassed at Ypres, refused to deploy it. But that didn't mean Germany forgot it. Deep in their laboratories, German scientists were creating the next nightmare, one that would haunt both sides of the Cold War. The forbidden idea was alive, hidden in glass vials and research notes. And though the world had sworn to bury it, the shadow of that green gas still lingered, waiting for a reason to return. By the late 1930s, Germany had risen again. Factories once silent under Versailles now roared with production. Tanks rolled from assembly lines, Messerschmitts filled the skies. And deep beneath the surface, scientists were perfecting a new generation of weapons, more terrible than any before. Among them were the chemists of IG Farben, a corporation that had turned Germany's chemical industry into an empire of its own. What began as research into pesticides soon uncovered something far deadlier. In 1936, a young scientist named Dr. Gerhard Schrader was searching for compounds to kill insects cheaply and efficiently. What he discovered instead was tabun, the first nerve agent in human history. It was invisible, odorless, and unspeakably lethal. Just a few milligrams on the skin could stop breathing within minutes. Unlike chlorine or mustard gas, it didn't just burn or choke. It shut the body down from the inside, paralyzing muscles, silencing the lungs, killing without pain or warning. Schrader himself was nearly its first victim. Within months, the Nazi government seized the discovery. Research on nerve agents became classified at the highest level. Facilities were built in secrecy, massive, heavily guarded complexes like Die Herrnfurth and Lübeck, where tabun and later sarin were produced in terrifying quantities. Thousands of tons were manufactured and stored in artillery shells, bombs, and containers buried across occupied Europe. And yet, none of it was ever used. The question has haunted historians for decades. Why did Hitler, a man willing to destroy cities and commit atrocities without hesitation, refuse to unleash the most terrifying weapon at his disposal? The answer lies somewhere between fear and memory. In the final months of World War I, Adolf Hitler was a young corporal serving near Ypres when a British gas attack burned his lungs and temper, airily blinded him. He spent weeks in a hospital, coughing and terrified, a victim of the same weapon Germany had unleashed years before. Those who knew him later said he never forgot the pain, the helplessness, or the humiliation. When World War II came, Hitler ordered the development of chemical and nerve weapons, but also swore they would never be used unless the Allies used them first. His generals prepared the stockpiles, trained special units, even loaded shells, but the order never came. Some claimed he feared Allied retaliation. Others believed he was haunted by his own experience in the trenches. Whatever the truth, the gas remained locked away, silent but ever present. Ironically, it was German scientists' restraint that prevented the world from witnessing horrors beyond imagination. Allied intelligence suspected the existence of new chemical agents, but never confirmed it. They too held their own stocks, mustard gas, phosgene, lewisite, just in case. Both sides stared across the front lines, knowing that one wrong move could turn Europe into a poisoned wasteland. By 1945, as the Third Reich crumbled, the forbidden stockpiles became prizes of war. American, British, and Soviet forces raced to capture the facilities before they could be destroyed. They found thousands of shells, tons of chemicals, and something even more valuable: the scientists who had created them. The forbidden weapon had not died with the war. It had simply changed owners. And as the victors divided the spoils, the nightmare that once terrified German soldiers was about to be reborn in the laboratories of a new global conflict. When Berlin fell in 1945, It wasn't just soldiers and generals the Allies were chasing. It was knowledge. The war had proven one truth beyond all others. Information was the new weapon. And no information was more valuable than the science Germany had tried to hide. In the ruins of Dierenfurth and Lübeck, Allied teams found what they feared and secretly hoped to discover. Steel cylinders filled with tabun and sarin, shells lined up for deployment, and notebooks filled with equations no Allied chemist had ever seen. Thousands of tons of the world's most dangerous substances lay scattered across collapsing Germany. The forbidden weapon hadn't disappeared. It had only changed hands. The Americans called it Operation Paperclip. The Soviets had their own version, a shadow program that swept across occupied zones, rounding up scientists, blueprints, and machinery. Both sides understood what they had found, a weapon so effective that even Hitler had been afraid to use it. For the United States, these discoveries triggered a quiet panic. If the Soviets gained control of Germany's chemical expertise, the balance of power could shift overnight. So in secret laboratories from Maryland to Utah, American chemists began to replicate and improve the captured German nerve agents. In 1949, their efforts succeeded, producing VX, a weapon even deadlier than sarin, capable of clinging to skin and surfaces for days. One drop was enough to kill a man. Across the Iron Curtain, Soviet scientists were doing the same. Working in closed cities like Shikhani and Volgograd, they refined their own series of nerve agents, the Novichok family, compounds that could bypass detection and resist antidotes. They were invisible, insidious, and unstoppable. And thus, the Cold War gained a second, silent front, one fought not with tanks or bombers, but with chemicals sealed in steel drums, hidden beneath layers of secrecy. Missiles could be counted. Warheads could be photographed. But a nerve agent could be mixed anywhere, shipped in unmarked containers, and released with a breeze. The world's leaders signed treaties. The Geneva Protocol still forbade chemical warfare, and the new United Nations condemned its use. But in the shadows, every superpower prepared for der Twin-Towers, or a future no one dared imagine. A future where the next world war would be invisible. Field exercises were conducted under the guise of defense training. Soldiers drilled in gas masks, civilians practiced sealing windows with tape, and entire towns stocked atropine injectors they hoped never to use. Scientists on both sides told themselves it was deterrence, not preparation. But the line between the two blurred more each year. By the 1960s, both NATO and the Warsaw Pact held enough nerve agents to kill humanity several times over. And yet, like nuclear weapons, they were never used, restrained not by mercy, but by fear. The fear of what would happen if they escaped control. The fear that one mistake could turn a city into a graveyard without a single bullet fired. The forbidden weapon that had once crawled across the trenches of Ypres had now evolved into a global specter, unseen, untouchable, and unstoppable. It haunted every strategy room, every command bunker, every diplomat's speech about peace, and as the Cold War deepened, one question remained unspoken. If the day ever came when words failed and war returned, who would be the first to open the valves again? For decades, the world believed that chemical warfare had ended with the ashes of World War II. Politicians spoke of deterrence, treaties, and moral progress. But beneath that polite fiction, accidents, leaks, and secret tests told another story. The forbidden weapon had not been destroyed. It had simply been buried under layers of bureaucracy and silence. The first cracks appeared in the 1950s. Across the American Southwest, strange reports began to surface. Livestock dying overnight, military convoys moving under sealed tarps, and scientists wearing masks in the desert heat. Officially, these were defensive field trials. In truth, they were live agent tests, experiments designed to measure how nerve gas dispersed, how long it lingered, and how effective protective gear truly was. The soldiers who participated were often told little. Some were volunteers, others were not. Many suffered nausea, paralysis, or worse, their medical records quietly sealed. On the other side of the Iron Curtain, the Soviets were just as secretive. In 1979, the city of Sverdlovsk in the Ural Mountains became the site of one of the most infamous accidents in chemical history. Officially, the outbreak was blamed on contaminated meat. Unofficially, Western intelligence soon discovered the truth. A valve in a secret biological weapons facility had leaked anthrax spores, killing dozens of civilians and soldiers. The Kremlin denied it for years. Even the doctors treating the victims were kept in the dark. When they asked why the lungs of their patients looked as if they had inhaled powder, they were told to stop asking questions. While the Soviets struggled to contain their disaster, smaller, quieter incidents unfolded elsewhere. In 1968, at Dugway Proving Ground in Utah, a test of the nerve agent VX went catastrophically wrong. A drifting cloud escaped containment, killing more than 6,000 sheep across nearby valleys. Farmers awoke to find entire herds lying still, their eyes glassy, their mouths foaming. The U.S. Army denied involvement until chemical traces matched samples from their own test range. The news leaked to the public, and for the first time since Ypres, the forbidden weapon was back on the front page. Governments promised reforms, investigations, and stricter controls. But secrecy breeds habit. Even as treaties like the 1972 Biological Weapons Convention and the 1993 Chemical Weapons Convention took shape, hidden stockpiles persisted. Deep bunkers in Russia, remote depots in the U.S., and covert labs in nations that denied ever building them. In each case, the logic was the same. We keep them only as a deterrent. But deterrence, once created, is never entirely dormant. For the soldiers who trained beneath that shadow, the fear was personal. Drills were constant. Don your mask in under 7 seconds, hold your breath, inject atropine into your thigh, and pray the wind is blowing the right way. Veterans would later say that nothing frightened them more than the hiss of a ruptured canister or the sudden alarm of a chemical alert. It was a terror you could not see, could not fight, only wait and hope. The forbidden weapon had escaped the trenches and laboratories to become a ghost woven into policy, science, and fear itself. Governments could hide the files, silence the witnesses, and classify the footage. But the truth remained. The most terrifying weapon ever made was not the one you could see, but the one that could find you in silence. When the Cold War finally ended, the world breathed a sigh of relief, but it was a shallow breath. Decades of secrecy had left something toxic in the air. Behind locked doors and sealed bunkers, the forbidden weapon still lingered, untouched, unspoken, and unresolved. Governments signed papers, diplomats shook hands, but in the shadows, no one truly knew how much of the nightmare remained. In 1993, after years of negotiation, the Chemical Weapons Convention was signed, the most ambitious disarmament treaty in modern history. For the first time, nations pledged not just to stop using chemical weapons, but to destroy them completely. Inspectors from the newly formed Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, OPCW, began their work, traveling across continents, counting shells, draining tanks, burning and neutralizing tons of the deadliest substances ever made. It was an act of redemption wrapped in bureaucracy. Every destroyed canister was a small victory against history itself. But total erasure proved impossible. Old stockpiles leaked. Forgotten depots were rediscovered. And, in the 21st century, the forbidden weapon returned, not in world wars, but in smaller, crueler conflicts. Syria, 2013. Entire neighborhoods choked beneath white clouds. Sarin, the same formula discovered in Nazi Germany, unleashed on civilians. Images of children gasping for air shocked the modern world, reminding everyone that the weapon humanity swore to forget was still very much alive. Investigations followed, condemnations filled the air, but the damage was done. The moral boundary that had held since 1945 cracked once again. Even more horrifying were the assassinations that followed, silent attacks in peacetime, in cities thought safe. Kuala Lumpur, 2017, VX, the deadliest of all nerve agents, used to kill a dictator's brother in an airport terminal. Salisbury, 2018, a former spy poisoned with Novichok, the Soviet nerve agent born from the same lineage of secrecy that began in the laboratories of the Reich. History had come full circle. Through it all, one lesson remained unchanged: that fear can outlive even the men who create it. The forbidden weapon had evolved from gas to nerve agents, from battlefield horror to political terror. It had survived treaties, wars, and generations because it preyed on something universal: the dread of the unseen. It doesn't need explosions or fire or thunder, just silence, and the knowledge that somewhere, in some vial or shell, death still waits without sound or mercy. And yet, perhaps there is hope in remembrance. Each generation that learns the story of Ypres, of Hitler's silence, of the Cold War's hidden arsenals, adds another layer of resistance, not through weapons, but through awareness. Because forgetting is what makes repetition possible. And the moment humanity stops fearing its own creations, it starts building them again. The forbidden weapon began as a whisper in the trenches, a pale green cloud roar, rolling over no man's land. A century later, it remains a shadow cast across our conscience, proof that progress and horror often walk hand in hand. It terrified German soldiers once, but what should terrify us most is how easily we could bring it back.